Two cops thought they could rough up the wrong man and walk away. They were wrong, and they learned it the hard way. It all kicked off on a Saturday night in Wichita Falls, Texas. One of those dry, heavy nights where even the pavement feels like it's holding its breath. Right outside a small neighborhood store called Sammy's Quick Mart, there was a man in navy blue scrubs juggling a bag of groceries and his car keys. His name? Deshaun Briggs. 34 years old, calm, patient. The kind of guy who always left extra tips at diners and held doors open without thinking twice. He'd just finished a 12-hour shift at Shepherd Medical Center, patching up patients, running between trauma rooms, doing the work nobody clapped for. He wasn't thinking about anything special, just that his feet hurt and he couldn't wait to kick off his sneakers and dig into the leftover barbecue sitting in his fridge. But then, in the middle of him fumbling for his car door, he caught it. The hard screech of tires, the sudden click of doors flying open, the heavy bootsteps pounding the asphalt toward him. "Hey, drop the bag, now!" barked a voice from behind him. Startled, Deshaun turned around, still holding the plastic sack of Gatorades and chips. Two police officers stormed toward him, one stocky with a red buzz cut, the other lanky with a serious mustache that didn't match the goofy look in his eyes. Both had their hands hovering way too close to their holsters. "I just came out the store, man. What's going on?" Deshaun said, confused, trying to keep his voice low and non-threatening. The shorter cop, Officer Brent Harlow, according to his badge, marched up and slapped the bag out of Deshaun's hand like he was brushing away trash. The Gatorades hit the ground and rolled into the street. "You matched the description," Harlow barked. "So shut it and put your hands behind your back." Deshaun blinked. "What description? I was just—" He didn't even finish before the other cop, Officer Dylan Markey, grabbed his wrist roughly and twisted it behind his back. People standing by the gas pumps stared. A woman recording on her phone. A teenager frozen mid-step. Nobody moved. The handcuffs clinked loud against Deshaun's skin. "I work at the hospital. I'm a nurse," he said through gritted teeth. "Yeah, and I'm the King of England," Harlow sneered. Deshaun could have fought. He could have screamed. But he didn't. He knew how those stories ended. Instead, he stood there on the side of Broad Street, hands cuffed, cheeks burning, heart pounding a slow drumbeat against his ribs. He thought about his mom, who had always told him, "Keep your dignity no matter what." He thought about the uniform folded neatly in the back of his closet, and he thought, not now, but soon. But if Deshaun thought the worst was over that night, he was dead wrong. It was just the beginning. The ride to the station wasn't long, but every second dragged. In the back of the squad car, Deshaun sat stiff as stone, his wrists raw from the cuffs. The two officers up front laughed about a basketball game playing on the radio, not even glancing back at him. No Miranda rights, no explanation, just the smell of sweat, cheap coffee, and dusty vinyl seats. When they pulled into the cracked parking lot of the Wichita Falls Police Department, Harlow yanked Deshaun out like a sack of potatoes. His elbow scraped against the doorframe. He winced, but said nothing. Inside, under the harsh fluorescent lights, the front desk clerk, an older woman with deep wrinkles and gray hair tied back in a bun, looked up from her crossword puzzle. Her eyes flicked from Deshaun to the officers, back to Deshaun, and something shifted behind her tired gaze. "Booking for shoplifting suspect," Officer Markey said, slapping a clipboard onto the counter. The woman narrowed her eyes slightly but didn't argue. She just buzzed open the metal door leading to the holding cells. Deshaun didn't fight, didn't raise his voice. He knew better than to give them any more ammo. They tossed him into a cold, windowless room. Concrete walls, a steel bench bolted to the floor. No phone call, no rights read, no paperwork shown. An hour passed, then 2, then 3. No one came. No one said anything. When the door finally cracked open, it wasn't a detective or a lawyer. It was Officer Harlow again, holding a flimsy manila folder. "So," Harlow started, flipping it open dramatically, "turns out, you're not our guy." Deshaun stayed seated, his fingers tightened into fists in his lap. "You fit the description, though," Harlow added casually, like he was talking about misplacing a TV remote. Dark hoodie, dark pants, male, black. There it was, no apology, no regret. Just a shrug and a half smirk. "You're free to go," Harlow said, tossing the folder onto the bench like he was doing Deshaun a favor. Deshaun stood up slowly, his knees cracking from sitting so long. He walked past them, silent, but not because he had nothing to say, because he had plans, big ones. As Deshaun pushed through the station doors into the cool night air, he didn't feel free. He felt like a soda can someone had shaken and tossed aside, dented on the outside, ready to explode inside. But Deshaun wasn't the type to explode. He was the type to move in silence. And that silence was about to get very, very loud. That night, Deshaun sat alone at his kitchen table. No lights on except the weak glow from the hood over the stove. His phone buzzed every few minutes. Texts from friends, coworkers, even strangers. Someone had posted a video of the arrest online, and it was spreading fast. The comments stung worse than the bruises on his wrists. Another one. Man was just buying Gatorade. These clowns don't even try to hide it anymore. Deshaun scrolled and scrolled, but it didn't make him feel any better. It made him feel smaller, angrier, tired. He thought about letting it go. He really did. He thought about showing up at work the next day, laughing it off with a weak joke, pretending like the world hadn't spat in his face or picking. But then he looked at the old photo framed above his kitchen counter, his father, Reverend Lionel Briggs, standing proud in his army uniform from 25 years ago. A man who had survived war zones and segregation and still taught his son one simple rule: never let anyone steal your dignity. Deshaun sat up straighter. He opened his closet and reached way back, past the winter coats, past the hospital scrubs. There it was. His own army uniform, polished shoes, sharp creases, medals earned from deployments in Afghanistan, humanitarian missions in Haiti, disaster relief in Louisiana. Deshaun hadn't worn it in years, not since he'd shifted full-time to nursing. He ran his hand over the ribbons. A reminder, he wasn't just a nurse. He wasn't just some guy at a convenience store. He was a soldier, a veteran, a protector. By midnight, Deshaun had a plan. He wasn't going to scream into the void online. He wasn't going to post angry videos or beg for sympathy. He was going to walk straight into the lion's den and make them see him for who he really was. He spent the next day gathering everything he needed: statements from the bystanders, screenshots of the video going viral, a formal complaint letter, tight, professional, no swearing, no typos. And one more thing. He called an old army buddy, now working as a legal advisor for military personnel. They agreed to meet him at the station. By the time Deshaun zipped up his uniform the next morning, something inside him had shifted. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't scared. He was ready. But Deshaun didn't know yet, as he straightened his tie and laced up his polished black shoes, just how badly the two officers had messed up their own futures. The station looked different in the daylight, less like a fortress, more like a tired old building trying too hard to look important. Deshaun pulled into the parking lot right at 9 o'clock sharp. He stepped out of his car slowly, deliberate. The sun caught the metals on his chest: silver, gold, bronze. Little flashes of a life most people couldn't even imagine. Across the lot, people paused. Officers on smoke breaks lowered their coffees. A rookie, no older than 23, nudged his partner and whispered something under his breath. Deshaun didn't rush. He smoothed his sleeves, adjusted the brim of his army cap, and walked straight through the double doors. His boots echoed sharp against the tile floor. Behind the glass of the front desk, the same older woman from 2 nights ago blinked up at him. For a second, her mouth opened like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. She just buzzed him through. Inside, the air was different, thicker, heavier. At the center of the main room, sitting with coffee and paperwork, were Officers Harlow and Markey. Deshaun stopped 10 feet from them. "Good morning," he said, voice steady. "I'm here to file an official complaint regarding an incident involving your officers." He could see it. The slow turn of Harlow's head, the double take, the way Markey shifted in his seat. The color drained from their faces. Recognition hit them like a truck. Markey muttered something under his breath. Harlow's hand went instinctively to his belt, like he was searching for something to ground him. "Sir," the front desk clerk called gently from behind him, "the watch commander will see you now." Deshaun nodded once, sharply, and followed her down the hallway. Waiting for him inside the office was Captain Elise Monroe, late 50s, salt and pepper hair, no-nonsense posture. And next to her, leaning casually against the wall, was Captain Jeremiah Knox, his Army JAG badge clipped neatly to his belt. They stood as Deshawn entered. Captain Monroe's eyes lingered on the rows of ribbons and medals across Deshawn's chest. There was a pause, a moment where the weight of what had happened seemed to fill every corner of that room. "Mr. Briggs," she said finally, her voice low. "Thank you for coming in." Deshawn laid the complaint packet on the table, tight, professional, no yelling, no begging, just facts, witness accounts, video evidence, proof of wrongful detention, proof of physical injury, proof of humiliation without cause. Captain Knox added 2 sheets of paper to the pile, a formal notice requesting an internal investigation and an advisory notice for the Department of Defense to be informed of mistreatment of military personnel. Monroe's face tightened. "You understand this is serious," she said. "I understand exactly how serious," Deshawn answered, locking eyes with her. A beat passed, then another. Outside the glass window, Harlow and Markey shifted uncomfortably. They could see everything happening, but they couldn't stop it. Captain Monroe nodded once, sharp and professional. "We'll be initiating an immediate review," she said, "and pending the investigation, both officers will be placed on administrative leave." Deshawn didn't smile. He didn't pump his fist or shout or gloat. He just collected his copies of the paperwork, tucked them under his arm, and turned to leave. As he passed back through the lobby, he caught one last glimpse of Harlow and Markey. 2 men who thought they were untouchable. 2 men who laughed at him, roughed him up, tossed him aside like garbage, now sitting pale and silent under the very weight they had built for others. But the real storm wasn't just coming for them, it was already here, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. By Monday morning, the city of Wichita Falls was buzzing, and not in a good way. The video of Deshawn's arrest had exploded. Local news anchors were running segments every hour. Headlines shouted from every screen. "Nurse and Army veteran wrongfully arrested by Wichita Falls PD. Caught on camera, humiliation without cause." Even national outlets were picking it up now. By noon, the mayor's office released a stiff statement promising a thorough and impartial investigation. At the station, Harlow and Markey weren't sitting so tall anymore. They showed up for their shifts, looking like they'd aged 10 years overnight. Whispers followed them down the halls. Officers who had once laughed at their jokes now avoided eye contact. Then came the official notices. Administrative leave, effective immediately. Internal affairs investigation, launched. Civil rights attorney, retained by Deshawn's legal team. Markey tried to play it off, shrugging to a few colleagues that it was all a big misunderstanding. But nobody was buying it. Harlow stayed quiet, his face tight, his fists buried deep in his jacket pockets. Deshawn didn't need to yell. He didn't need to storm the station or stage a protest. He had done something more devastating. He had let the truth do all the talking. Meanwhile, Deshawn's life flipped upside down in a different way. He found himself flooded with messages of support. From nurses, soldiers, neighbors, even strangers from across the country. "Thank you for standing up. You make us proud. We're with you." It wasn't just sympathy. It was solidarity. One afternoon, while Deshawn was grabbing coffee at a small spot called the Grindhouse downtown, an older man in a Vietnam veteran hat tapped him on the shoulder. "You didn't just fight for yourself," the man said, voice gravelly but strong. "You fought for every one of us who's ever been treated like we don't matter." Deshawn nodded quietly, emotion catching in his throat. Sometimes the loudest victories are the ones nobody sees on TV. Over the next few weeks, both Harlow and Markey faced official disciplinary hearings. Reports leaked that several past complaints, once buried or ignored, had resurfaced thanks to the investigation. It turned out Deshawn wasn't the first innocent person they'd cornered. He was just the first one they couldn't bury. Within 2 months, both officers were suspended without pay. Internal recommendations were made for termination. And quietly, away from the cameras, civil lawsuits were brewing. Not just from Deshawn, but from others who finally felt brave enough to come forward. As for Deshawn, he didn't disappear. He didn't hide. He went back to work at Shepherd Medical Center. He kept saving lives. He kept showing up for people. Only now, when he walked through the hospital halls, people didn't just see a nurse. They saw a man who had faced the worst and stood taller because of it. But for Deshawn, this victory wasn't about revenge. It was about reminding everyone watching that dignity isn't given, it's defended. The news cycle eventually moved on, like it always does. New scandals, new headlines, new distractions. But in Wichita Falls, the memory of what happened to Deshaun Briggs didn't just fade away. It left a mark. It sparked changes inside the police department. New sensitivity training, mandatory body cams turned on at all times, stricter accountability measures. Small steps, late steps, but steps forward all the same. Deshaun never once showed up to brag or gloat. He didn't stand outside the courthouse with a microphone. He didn't shout anyone down. Instead, he quietly met with local high school students during a Veterans Day event. He spoke to them about service, about standing up without violence, about the strength it takes to stay calm when the world wants you to lose control. He told them the truth, that injustice is real, that dignity isn't something you beg for. It's something you defend every day with how you carry yourself, even when no one's looking. And the kids listened, really listened, because Deshaun wasn't a headline. He wasn't a viral video. He was a real man standing right there, breathing the same air, wearing a uniform that meant something. Weeks later, Deshaun got a letter from the mayor's office, an official apology on behalf of the city, another from the Department of Defense, thanking him for his service and his continued embodiment of American values both in and out of uniform. He framed neither. They stayed tucked in a drawer under his bed. Because for Deshaun, the real reward wasn't paperwork or payouts. It was knowing that somewhere, someone had watched how he handled it all and decided to stand a little taller the next time they were tested. He knew he couldn't fix everything. Racism wasn't new. Abuse of power wasn't new. And the fight for fairness wasn't going to end just because he wore a nice uniform one day. But he also knew this. Change doesn't happen in tidal waves. It happens one small moment at a time. One decision to stay calm. One refusal to be broken. One step forward when everything in you wants to sit down. And that's what made the difference. The story of Deshaun Briggs isn't about a man who got even. It's about a man who reminded everyone around him, and maybe even himself, that respect can be demanded without raising your voice. That real power doesn't come from a badge or a title. It comes from knowing exactly who you are, no matter who's trying to tell you different. And that's a lesson every one of us can carry into the next time life tries to knock us down. If Deshaun Briggs taught us anything, it's this: never let anyone else define your worth, and never let anger steal your dignity. If this story moved you even just a little, share it with someone who might need the reminder. And if you ever find yourself in Deshaun's shoes, remember, stay calm, stand tall, and make your voice heard the right way. Because dignity isn't given, it's defended.